What's up, everyone? Tera Roberts here with Fantasy Alarm, and we are talking free agency deep cuts for Week 10. At quarterback this week, I initially wanted to go with Marcus Mariota, but weather concerns are spooking me just a bit, so we are going to pivot down even further to Andy Dalton. Dalton's worst case scenario is 10 to 12 fantasy points, but his ceiling is oddly high because in a good matchup, the Saints are willing to let him air it out. And a game against Pittsburgh could be one of those matchups. I think that Dalton's floor is a bit safer this week, so I think that we see him anywhere between 15 to 20 fantasy points. At running back, the guy to grab is Jaylen Warren. Warren is just 17% rostered in Yahoo leagues as of the filming of this video, but that is quickly rising because the Steelers are looking for ways to get Warren more integrated into the offense. It's tough to imagine that Najee Harris gets completely benched, and it's more likely that if anything happens that the Steelers' backfield more so resembles a backfield like the Chicago Bears. Regardless, Warren has made the most of his opportunities and his increased role, and it's possible that he can offer weekly RB3 or flex value moving forward. Another option is Jerick McKinnon. Fantasy managers prefer the higher rostered Clyde Edwards-Helaire and rookie Isaiah Pacheco, but week after week, it's McKinnon who offers the most fantasy viable running back. Putting last week's game aside, Pacheco has been the most productive back on the ground. But the problem is that the Chiefs don't really run the ball like that, and groundwork is just not a path to fantasy points in their offense. Whoever is catching passes is the back with the most fantasy upside, and that is Jerick McKinnon. And in week 9, McKinnon caught 6 of 8 targets for 40 yards. As long as the Chiefs remain a pass-happy team, McKinnon is the only back in Kansas City that can provide weekly consistency. At wide receiver, we will keep our options below 20% rostered this week, and the highest rostered option is Terrace Marshall. The exit of Christian McCaffrey opened up space within the Panthers' offense, and Marshall took full advantage of it, literally doubling his snap count over the past 3 weeks, with increased targets, high yards per catch, and his first career touchdown. And Carolina faces an Atlanta defense that has allowed the second most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Now, we do have some weather concerns that we talked about in this game, and that could limit passing, but Marshall should still be rostered even if you don't plan to start him. Marvin Jones is the third option behind Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. Outside of 2 terrible games against Philadelphia and Denver, which is understandable, Marvin Jones has had a minimum of 5 targets and as high as 11 targets per game. So, provided the matchup is good, Jones sees enough work to justify a low-end flex option in deep leagues. And this week's matchup is great against Kansas City. Jacksonville should throw for high volume to keep up with Patrick Mahomes and should be able to exploit the Kansas City defense. Darius Slayton is a very low rostered option for a guy who is technically the wide receiver 1 of the New York Giants. While Wan'Dale Robinson is the hot commodity with the higher chance of rest of season upside, Slayton has been the most consistent option and is very low rostered. Slayton has had double-digit fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. His upside is limited because the Giants are a low-volume pass team that runs the offense through Saquon Barkley, but his floor has been fairly steady if you're in a pinch. Let's talk about a couple of health contingent options at wide receiver as well. Nico Collins returned to limited practice this week, and if he can work his way back into action, he is a deep flex option. Prior to his injury, Collins saw increase in snap count and target, and had back-to-back double-digit fantasy point games in PPR, and Brandon Cooks missed practice on Wednesday with a wrist injury and has the added caveat of his personal frustrations with the Texans organization. Collins could find himself as Houston's wide receiver 1. And if Jarvis Landry is healthy, he is a low-end flex option this week against Pittsburgh. This is a good matchup for the Saints offense to get back in sync and on track, and Landry would likely immediately jump into the wide receiver 2 spot behind Chris Olave, because no other Saints receiver has been a reliable option at all for Andy Dalton. And at tight end, this is a bit risky, but Cade Otton has been on the rise and has an excellent matchup against a Seattle defense that struggles against tight ends. It is risky because Cameron Brate returned to practice this week, and it's possible that his return hurts Otton's productivity, but Otton has been a fairly reliable target for Tom Brady, and he's coming off a big game of over 17 fantasy points in PPR and was the tight end 4 on the week, just behind Travis Kelce. Given the matchup, Otton is poised for a repeat. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to Fantasy Alarm, and come back next week for another round of deep waiver ads.